Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of GDDV 106 Development Concepts. My name is Kasanis. Guys, we're moving along really well. If you were actually sitting in my classroom, this would be the start of week 3. So we've already done a fair amount of stuff here. We've already talked about the course, took a look at the Unity interface, we talked about primitive data types and data types, talked about functions, and we talked about the idea of object-oriented programming and classes. Today we're going to move on to what I've got listed here as logic and control. Particularly today, though, we are going to take a quick look at another data type. We're going to take a look at arrays because they're also pretty important. All right, let's get started. Okay, so arrays. Great. Arrays are just another data type, and I've separated them not because they are more important, although you will be using them fairly heavily in anything you actually do. They do have slightly more functionality, I guess, than other data types that we've discussed. And they actually utilize the other data types we discussed. That's the only reason I've separated them into their own video. So let's talk about arrays. An array is basically a data type that's capable of containing multiple variables of the same type. So if you've got yourself an array of integers, for example, an array of integers will contain multiple integer values. An array is declared in a very similar manner to that of any other data type that we've discussed. The only difference is it utilizes square brackets to indicate that we are talking about an array. And we've got an example here, int, open square bracket, close square bracket, my integers. And what that would do would be to declare an array of integers. That's what it would do. The int, the type, is at the beginning, declares it's an array with the square brackets, and then the name of the array is my integers. Now, before we can actually utilize an array, before we can actually access any of the values or even place any values within the array, we have to define how large the array is. We have to allocate space for the array. And we can do so upon declaration utilizing, one example is utilizing the new keyword. So if we again say int square brackets, my integer equals new int, open square bracket, value, close square bracket, semicolon. What that's going to do is, again, it's going to declare an array of type integer, and it's going to set aside space for 5 new integer values. That's what it's going to set aside space for in memory. So we haven't actually we've allocated the space, but we haven't actually put anything into the variable yet at all. If, however, we want to, upon declaration of the new array, we decide we want to also initialize the array, we can absolutely do so. We can first declare the array, int square brackets my integers, just as we did before, and then utilizing the equal sign and our braces, open and close braces, and the values between the braces is going to define what goes into the array. In the case we have here, int square brackets my integers equals open brace 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, close brace, semicolon is going to create a brand new array of enough space for 5 integers, and the integer values are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have initialized the array and the size of the array and declared the array all in one line. Afterwards, once we've actually put something into the array, as soon as we've made space in the array, it's going to have something in it. I mean, if we've got an array of game objects and you don't have any game objects actually in your array, it's going to be null. But once you've allocated the space, then those integer values, the locations, are available to be accessed in some way. Accessing an individual space within an array is fairly simplistic. My integers index equals value will allow us to place value into a specific location within the array, particularly the space of index. Now, the indexing in an array starts at 0 and goes up from there. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The very first space of an array, the very first element of an array, is at index equals 0. So if we take a look here, my integers in square brackets 0 equals 1 will place 1 as the value in the first element. My integers square brackets 1 equals 2 will place 2 in the second element of the array. So we can build our array in that format fairly simplistically. We can also access the array in the same format. If we take a look at, let's say we printed my integers square bracket 0, close square bracket, it's going to print the value of 1 to the screen. We absolutely do not need to fill an array in a sequential order. The elements can be left as whatever they are by default. If they're null, etc., they'll be just left as such. You can skip indexing in your array. So if you want to, you can fill the first space, so the 0th position, and then the 10th position if you want to. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. However, if you try to access a index that's above the length of the array, it's going to toss an error. So you're going to actually result in an error, and it's going to tell you there's nothing there, and it's going to error out. So just like other variables, our array can either be public or private. And just like we talked about previously, the public and private variable is going to be utilized in the same way that a public or private variable is utilized that we talked about previously. So just like our other data types, if you make it public or private, it's either going to be accessible to outside scripts, it's going to be available within the inspector if it's public. If it's private, it's a little bit more protected. The great thing about it, just like everything else, is you can actually set the array size independently inside of the inspector from the actual array elements. So if you want to, you can set the size of your array immediately, and then later on fill the indexing or fill the array spaces as you move forward. That's perfectly fine. And all of that is available in the inspector, and we will take a look at that inside our practical example in just a moment. There are a couple of other things that I think that we really should talk about. There's a couple of really important commands associated with an array. So let's take a look. And all of these things are available. If you start to type, if you want to see what they are, you can either Google or go into the docs for Unity's C#, and you can take a look at what is available for your array, the commands that are available for an array. There's a couple that I think are pretty important that I want to talk about, particularly that of length. So myArray.length will return the length of an array. And it's going to be really, really important later on when we start talking about looping. It's going to be really important later on if you want to loop through the length of an array, you have to know how large it is, right? If you try and access a value outside of the length of an array, you're going to run into problems. So understanding the length of the array is going to be really important. MyArray.length is going to return an integer value indicating the length of an array. As well, just like our other data types, we can absolutely utilize an array as a return type from a function. We talked about functions in the last episode. We can absolutely have a return type of an array, or we can use it as a part of the parameter, as a part of the parameter list inside of a function. So if we take a look at my example here, int with our square brackets, double array, and it means that we are actually returning an array of integers. And inside the parameter list, I have int square brackets original means we are passing in an integer array called original. All right, so in exactly the same way that other data types can be used within functions, we can utilize our arrays in the same way. All right, so rather than continue talking about this, why don't we head over into Unity and take a look at some examples that I've got. Okay, see you in Unity. Okay guys, here we are in Unity, and I'm utilizing the same project that I used in the last episode. I've just added in a new scene. So I've got my week 3 scene up here. Let's take a look at what we have in the week 3 scene. We have our main camera, which we're always going to have. We have ourselves 2 empty game objects, second player and first player. They're just empty game objects. And lastly, we've got ourselves week 3 object. And week 3 object has on it a script called array demonstration. So let's double click and take a look at what the array demonstration script actually is. So if we take a look here, some of this is commented out, but what we're really interested in is our arrays. At the very top here, I have my int array. So I've got an integer array, and I've declared it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in doing so, I've declared myself an array of integers that has the elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 associated with it. I also have a public int array called myArray, and I have a public game object array called gameArray. Now, because these are public, they're both going to be available in the inspector, and we're going to take a look at that in just 1 second. Let's take a look at what we're doing down here in the start function. In the start function, like I said, we've already initialized my integer array, which is great. If we take a look at myArray, we haven't actually initialized the size of the array or any of the elements yet. So what I'm doing here in the start is I'm initializing the size of the array, the length of the array. So I'm creating an array of 5 integers. Additionally, what I'm doing here in myArray is I'm setting the value of the 4th element, actually the 5th element, because it starts at 0, of the 5th element to 5. So the 5th element is going to be equal to 5. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is the indexing that we can have for this, and the 4th value, like the fourth index, is actually equal to 5. Okay, and I'm going to print that value here. The print the fifth element in the array is my array element 4. So that's what we're printing out here. Now, what I wanted to show you is that I am able to reinitialize the array simply by resetting it to a new set of integer values. So my array is equal to new int within my square brackets a value of 6. So I'm increasing the size of my array by 1. And it's not simply adding on a new position. As soon as I utilize the new keyword, it is actually getting rid of all of the old values. So when we take a look at my array, it's no longer going to have the fifth position as a value of 5. The fourth element, the fifth position, or the fourth index as a value of 5. That's not going to be the case anymore. It's going to be all zeros once again. Okay, now down here, I wanted to demonstrate that we could utilize an array as a parameter within a function, and that we could return an array as a return type. So I've got something here called the array doubler. If we go down here and take a look, the array doubler is right here, and all it's going to do, we're utilizing a for loop here, which we haven't discussed yet, and we will be discussing that in the next video. But basically, it's just utilizing the for loop. It's going around and around and around, and it's doubling the value in each index position. That's all it's doing. It's going to each index position and it's multiplying it by 2. Okay. Remember, my index had a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So later on, we're expecting to see values of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay. And here I'm returning the original array. So whatever I've set up for the original array, it's being returned. And obviously, because I'm utilizing in this particular case, because I'm utilizing only my index, my integer, I think I called it, my integer array. Because I'm only using this, my integer, I could have simply accessed it. It's part of the same class, and I could have accessed it immediately. But doing it like this, utilizing a new name, a new parameter name, is going to allow me to feed other things in besides just those that are associated with my particular class. Okay, so that's all it's doing here. It's returning the original array, and it gets fed back into, and then I print out the value of the third position. Okay, so in that case, it should be, it goes 1, 2, 3. So the third position, it should have a value of 6. Okay, so let's simply save this to make sure it's saved, save all, and let's head back into Unity and check it out. If I simply hit play right now, okay, so there we go. And we see that the fifth element in the array, my array, is equal to 5. And we see that the array element at position 3 is equal to 6. So these are the things that we want to check out before. Now, what's really interesting about this? First of all, over here, we can see that my array and game array are both public variables, right? They're both public arrays, and they're immediately available inside of the inspector. Now, my array, what we did is we actually assigned a value to the length. We originally said the length is going to be 5, and now our array length is 6. We assigned a value of 5 to the fifth position, which would have been right here, element 4, and it should have said the value of 5 here. But because we utilized that, because we resized our array as a value of 6, we now have brand new values in here. They've all been reset to a value of 0, and we've lost all of our original elements that we had in there. Okay, so that's something very important to note, that it's once you reinitialize it, once you resize your array utilizing the new keyword, it's not simply making your array larger, it is literally remaking your array from scratch, right? It's going to reset all the values. So we can see here that all my values have been reset. Now, additionally, we took a look at the doubler, so we know the doubler worked. Here's our doubler, the value is 6. So we know that worked. We were able to pass in our values, our array values, through as a parameter list, part of the parameter list, and we were able to return our array as the return type, and we can see the value is currently 6. Awesome. Now, one of the last things I want to show you about arrays right now is the fact that inside of our public array here within the inspector, I can see my game array, and currently the size is 0, which means it has no elements at all in it. I have a number of different ways of actually going ahead and filling this array. Because it's available here in the inspector, I could simply grab, well, let me show you this first. This is going to be important. I'm going to click on the game object again to bring this back up. There is a little lock right here. All right, this little lock up here in the upper right-hand corner, you want to click that, and that's going to lock your view of the inspector. So now I can actually utilize clicking elsewhere, and it's not going to change my view. See, I'm clicking elsewhere, and it's not actually changing the view in the inspector. If I want to, I can go back and click it again, and it'll immediately change my view. So I can see now that I'm able to go back and forth. So I'm going to lock my view because my plan is to drag second and first player into my game array just so I can see how to populate it in the inspector. So I'm going to click and I'm going to shift click to be able to highlight both of these. I'm going to drag and I'm going to drag it over the game array. And you can see how my pointer's now changed. When I let go, it will immediately change the size of the array and it'll immediately populate the array as well. And I can change these individually. I can even put the second one, if I want to put second in there twice, I absolutely could. So I can drag it into an individual element and I can drop it. And you can see now I have both of those in there. I also have the ability to change the size of my array dynamically by coming in here and let's say I want it to be 3. And look what it did there. It automatically populated the next position with the previous position. So here is the second player. I just copied it over and I made a new array element that has that same element in it. If I want to, I can drag first player in there and replace it. Okay, so you can access everything through the inspector as you wish. All right. Okay, guys, well, let's try that one more time so you can see it. I currently have an array size of 6 for my array. I'm going to add in here a value of 6 for the 5th element. And when I change the array size to 7, bam, I automatically autofill the next array index position with the value of the previous one. Okay, guys, well, that's it. That's all I want to show you about arrays. We're going to take a look at arrays more in depth in the next video when we start talking about the idea of our looping and our if statements. So we're going to take a look at conditional statements, and we're going to take a look at our ability to control through loops. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know down below with a thumbs up, and if you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. I like to get the thumbs up, but if you're going to give me a thumbs down, I'd really like to know why. All right, guys, a thumbs down for me means that something I did wrong, and I'd like to know what it is. So just let me know in the comments. I didn't like your voice, or I think you're too bald, or whatever it is you want to say is perfectly fine. Just let me know what I can improve. All right, guys? All right. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.